The Belle Époque period is an extremely interesting one. This was a time when great political, social, cultural and technological changes took place. This was also a time when the rivalry between the great European powers entered into a new dimension, when those powers tried to take control of the last available colonies and to form alliances which were supposed to protect their interests and at the same time to grant their dominance over their opponents. And this is the topic of a game which I will be presenting you today. A game which will take us to the Belle Époque period. Hello, this is Michel Sarbet and this is a new episode of Wojennik TV. Today I will be taking you to the Belle Époque period, a very interesting moment in history when the major powers, European powers, tried to take control of the last possible colonies, when they tried to establish alliances, both with other major powers as well as minor countries, in order to secure their position, in order to secure their dominance over their opponents. The game which I will be showing you today is called Belle Époque, and this is a game released by Aleph Game Studio in 2020. The designer of this game is Paulo Carraro. The game is for 1 to 4 players, aged 15 or higher, and the time of play will be somewhere around 2 to 3 hours. As mentioned a few seconds ago, the game is for 1 to 4 players, but during this review I will be focusing only on the standard mode, which requires 2 to 4 players. The solo mode will be a topic of another review. La Belle Époque, as you might expect, transports us to the times of La Belle Époque, a moment in history where the major powers tried to secure their dominance, not resulting to war, but due to diplomatic offensives, due to technological cultural development. And during the game, we will take control of one of the major powers. We can take control of France, of the United Kingdom, of Russia, and of the Central Powers, known as under the form of the German and the Austrian Empire. In the initial version of the game, there were also other empires. The Austrians were a separate empire, the Italians were present, but Paulo Carraro decided to merge the Austrians and the Germans and to make the Italians a minor country, which can become our ally during the game. So in the final version we have 4 empires. We will be taking control of one of them, trying to secure its dominance, trying to make it the most powerful and most prestigious one in the entire world. Today I will show you how La Belle Époque looks, what are its basic mechanisms, and in the end I would like to tell you a few words about what I think are its strong but also weaker points. So let's, without further ado, take a look at how La Belle Époque looks. Here is a brief look at La Belle Époque, prepared to play a standard 4 players game. The game comes with tons of interesting and high quality components, and during the game we will be using a lot of space on the table. The objective of La Belle Époque is to score the highest possible number of victory points, which will be tracked on a specific track located at the bottom right part of the board. Here, as you can see, each empire, each power will receive his own tokens in order to track the number of victory points. Those victory points will be scored at three moments of the game. The game can last up to 9 turns, and the number of turns will be tracked on the turn track, which is on the upper right part of the board. But the game can end also due to a sudden death trigger, because during the game we will be drawing event cards at the start of each and every turn. At the beginning of the first turn we will be drawing cards which will be part of the event deck, and composed of events of the first era. During the turns from 4th to 6th, we'll be drawing additional cards coming from another set of cards, which will be the second era events. But it's starting from turn 7 that the game can end due to sudden death, because among the events which are inside the deck of the cards of the third era, we have also the card which is the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, which, as we all know, triggered and started the First World War. So as soon as this card is drawn, as you can see, the game is immediately stopped and the final scoring is performed. If the card is not drawn on turn 7, 8 or 9, we play those turns and we end the game at the end of turn 9 when we make a final scoring. So we will be scoring 3 times, at the end of turn 3, at the end of turn 6 and at the end of turn 9, or at the end of or at a specific moment when the sudden death card is drawn. Each empire will have a certain number of assets and tools that it will be using during the game. So among those assets, each empire will receive their own empire's board, on which each empire will stock several elements. Firstly, we will be storing our diplomatic cubes, which will go into our embassies and which will be added to this embassy at the start of each turn. So we have also a pool of diplomatic missions which are outside of the playing area, which will be added to our pool and which from this moment could be used in order to send them to some parts of the world. We will be also storing armies which will be used during diplomatic conflicts, which will grant us a +1 modifier in order to resolve such a conflict, and we will be storing fleets, which firstly will enable us to receive an additional +2 modifier in order to resolve diplomatic conflicts, and additionally the presence of fleets in Asia and in Africa will enable us to move diplomatic cubes to those 2 continents. We have several boxes, the reserves boxes. This is the box on which we will be storing all the unbuilt units. We have the arsenal where built units are present. We have also minor nation bonuses, which is a box used when we acquire a bonus related to a certain minor nation. We have also an armament box where we will be storing armament cubes. We have a great work. Each nation will have their own great work, which can be built once during the game, but which will firstly give you a certain amount of victory points or prestige points, and secondly it will also give you a specific benefit related to your empire. We have also a units cost table indicating how much building units costs, and we have also a brief sequence of play summary alongside with a resource phase where we can see how much money our empire gets each turn and how many diplomatic cubes we receive. Additionally, we have also information how to set up the game, so what components should we place and where, and finally for which countries, for which places on the board we can score additional points. Because when we speak of scoring, firstly we score points for each controlled country, no matter if this is a minor country or this is a colony. Then we score also points related to our specific objectives. So for instance, the Central Powers receive points for a number of controlled colonies in Africa. They receive also points if they control Tanganyika. So those are specific objectives, different for each nation. At the start of the game, we will also receive 2 random intrigue cards, because in the game we will have 2 different kinds of cards, or rather 3 different kinds of cards. I already said that we have event cards, but we also have intrigue cards, which will be used during the game in order to hinder our opponents or in order to obtain a specific benefit. Those cards are always presented in such a way that we have 2 different effects, and we can choose which one to use when playing this card. Apart from intrigue cards, each player will also have his own nation specific cards, and 3 of them are the same for each country. Those are the nationalist disorders, the diplomatic contrasts and social policy. Each of them will have the same cost and the same effect, but each empire will receive also one special card, which will be a unique card used only by this nation, which will grant it a huge benefit. For instance, when it comes to the Central Powers, it enables them to use additional troops when resolving diplomatic conflicts, enabling them to receive a +6 modifier, which normally is limited to +4. How the game of La Belle Époque looks, because I have already spoken a little bit about how we score points, how also the elements which we'll be using look, but how the structure of a turn looks. So during a turn, we will be playing several phases, and during each of those phases, we will be acting in accordance to the current turn order. So we have also a special turn order track, which can change from turn to turn. The nation who passes first will be first player during the next turn. But during the game, we will be resolving several phases during each turn. Firstly, we will be executing a very short resource phase during which each empire will receive a certain amount of money in accordance to their current income. Then they also will receive a certain number of diplomatic cubes added to their embassies. The second phase is the event phase, during which we will be drawing 2 cards from the event draw deck, and those cards can do several things. They can remove cubes from the map board. They can add new cubes to the map board. So they can hinder or help the empires. It depends on the cards. Then we pass to the intrigue cards phase, because on specific turns indicated also on the turn track, we will be drawing new intrigue cards, which can be used from the moment that we draw them. And then we pass to the action phase, which is really the heart of the game. This is when each empire can take from 1 to 2 actions during their move. The most obvious action, which I already mentioned, is passing. If you pass, it's a definite pass, and you will just move your nation's turn order marker to the bottom track in order to indicate that you already passed. But apart from this action, we have several others. We have the possibility of buying military units. Each nation has a certain amount of military units available, which start the game in their reserves and which can be transferred to their arsenal, paying a certain amount of money. The number of money is indicated on each empire's card. Then we have the most commonly used option of sending diplomatic missions. Each empire will have a certain number of diplomatic mission cubes, and in order to send a cube towards a given country, we have to respect certain rules. Firstly, it deserves to be underlined that we have 3 different continents present on the map board. We have Europe, we have Asia, and Africa. Each nation can freely send diplomatic missions to Europe without any restrictions, but if we want to send a diplomatic mission to Africa or to Asia, we have to have a fleet present on the specific box related to this continent. If we don't, we cannot send a cube. A special power related to Russia enables Russia to send diplomatic missions to some of the countries, even though they do not have a fleet in the box. This is related to the fact that obviously Russia is an empire existing as well as in Europe, also in Asia, so it's logical that Russians can send also some diplomatic missions to Asia where they are already present. But other nations, in order to send diplomatic missions to Africa or to Asia, have to have some fleets present in the boxes, and if they have such fleets, they can send diplomatic missions. Diplomatic missions are placed inside a given country, and the purpose of it is to take control of such a country. Because as you can see, in each country we have a certain number of boxes, and those boxes will be filled by cubes, and at a certain moment of the game, a nation can receive a total majority, can obtain a total majority in a given country. If they do, the country is controlled by this nation, and it will grant points at the next scoring. Additionally, it is important to differentiate minor countries and colonies, which are of a different color. This is important because the control of Minor countries gives you additional benefits. Those benefits are additional markers which are present, as you can see, on the board, and which can be, for instance, additional income, which can be additional prestige points, or maybe additional troops. For instance, the control of Greece enables you to use the Greek fleet. So it is important to control both minor nations as well as colonies, because different countries can be different objectives for different empires, and controlling certain parts of the board gives you significant advantages. Additionally, controlling minor countries gives you a huge benefit when we take a look at how certain parts of the board look. Because, for instance, controlling Belgium will give you one additional benefit, not only the bonus, which is +2 during each income phase. Additionally, you can treat all the Belgian cubes which are present on the board at the game start as your allies. So controlling Congo, for instance, will be significantly easier because it will be sufficient to have 2 own cubes, 2 Belgian cubes which are allied to our country in order to control Congo. Sending diplomatic missions means that we will be trying to seize control of different parts of the board in order to achieve our own objectives. But it is also possible to try to eradicate your opponent's cubes from a given location. And if we want to do it, we have to trigger a diplomatic dispute. In order to do it, we send a cube and we place it on top of one of our opponent's cubes, which already exists in such a country. If we do, we can trigger such a diplomatic dispute, which we can then resolve using one of our next actions. Resolving a diplomatic dispute means that we will be trying to obtain a higher combat value or diplomatic value using our troops, fleets which are present in the region. The defender and the attacker can activate his own armies that they possess in their arsenal, their fleets present in the related fleet box, in order to obtain some bonuses which can be +4, which can be at maximum at a +4 modifier, unless you are playing the British or the Germans, who can from time to time have higher modifiers, and then both sides roll a die. The side obtaining the higher result wins the diplomatic conflict, and if it was the defender, the attacking cube is removed. If it was the attacker, the defending cube is being replaced by the attacker's cube, which means that it can change the control of a given country. If the control changes, the player who controlled the country up until this moment has to return the benefit, for instance, the additional income counter from his own nation card. Apart from those actions, we have also the possibility of play a card. As I said earlier, we have several cards, both nation-specific cards as well as intrigue cards. Playing a card is also an action. We can gain international prestige, which means that paying a certain amount of money enables us to move on the prestige track. Each country will be moving his own country's prestige marker to the right, trying to obtain additional benefits, because as soon as a counter enters a given column, we receive the benefit related to the place where such a marker is being placed. And at the end of the game, we have also an additional points bonus, which is attributed to the presence of this marker on this track. We have also an interesting action, which is the armaments selling action, which is disponible from turn 4 onwards. It means that a nation can use black cubes coming from his own nation's chart in order to change the number of available places in a given country. For instance, a nation can decide to sell armaments to Congo, reducing the number of available places in such a country. Armament cubes take a place and they reduce the number of places available in such a country, changing also the number of cubes that we have to put inside the country in order to obtain control of it. For instance, normally to control Congo we have to have 4 cubes in it, but when we place an armament cube, 3 are sufficient, because 3 are the total majority from this point towards the end of the game.
We can build a great work, which I already explained. For instance, the Germans can build the Kiel Canal, which grants them additional benefits. And finally, we can also invest, which means that we just take money, but this action will be quite rarely used. That's it when it comes to the basic actions. We play in such a way until one of the players triggers the end of the game, which is the draw of the sudden death card, or the game ends due to the end of the 9th turn. Then we make a final scoring, we verify each nation's objectives, we attribute points, and we verify who managed to score the biggest number of points possible. The empire having this number of points wins the entire game. Now I'd like to invite you to the final part of this video, because I would like to tell you a little bit about what I think about La Belle Époque, how I played it, what I enjoyed in it, but what I also think can be some weaker elements of this design.
Judging La Belle Époque is something which is quite interesting from my perspective. The reason is that I already played several games released by Aleph Game Studio earlier. Among them, Montecuccoli on the Rab, Dego, which were designs which are criticized, especially due to the fact that the rules for those games were very badly written. So the first thing which I would like to very strongly underline while talking about La Belle Époque is the fact that the rules for this game and the quality of the components in this game compared to other earlier games of Aleph Game Studio are really top-notch. And this is something which really should be clearly said. The quality of what you receive in the box of La Belle Époque is outstanding. I have the first edition of this game, the second one is even better, but the first one is already extremely good. The quality of the map, great. The quality of the counters, extremely good. The cards, pretty artwork, no problems when it comes to how to read what is printed on the cards. The rulebook, extremely well written, something which I really appreciated, especially with my previous experiences with the games released by Aleph Game Studio. Here it was really terrific, and I must say it, I must repeat it once more, great work. The second thing which I also think should be underlined is the fact that this is a game about a very interesting topic. Most war games, most political games are focused on very well-known events, on events which are very often used in wargaming. We have tons of games about the Second World War, about the First World War, about the US Civil War, about the Napoleonic Wars, but games set during the La Belle Époque period are really rare. Most of them are focused on specific wars, for instance on the American-Spanish War or on the Boer Wars. But games covering the whole La Belle Époque period are rare or even inexisting. So La Belle Époque is something extremely interesting from this point of view. Thirdly, what I really like in the game is the fact that this interesting topic is very well linked to the mechanisms used in the game. While playing the game, we will be having the actual feeling of being at the commands of one of the empires of the time. Our main objective will be to take control of territories, to make them our colonies, or to enter into alliances with minor countries. We will be sending diplomatic missions. We will be trying to push out from some territories our opponents. We will be investing in our military. We will be sending armaments. Everything is okay in this game in terms of how the mechanisms are linked with the theme and with the topic. We do not have the feeling of anything being out of the picture. Everything here is well linked together, and it gives us a very interesting image of a period which, as I said a few moments ago, is very rarely used in wargaming. What I really like in this game is also the flexibility related to the number of players, because you can easily play La Belle Époque in a group of 2, 3 and 4 players. And additionally, you can play it in several ways, because while playing with fewer than 4 players, you have the option of attributing more than one power to a player, but you can also use the solo mode, bots, in order to still stick to one power per player, and using bots to take control of the missing empires. So it's also possible to play in such a way. So the fact that it is possible to play the game not only with the full 4 players count is also something which should be underlined. Additionally, it is also important to say that the game will work at its best when we have the full 4 players. It's much more entertaining, it's much more interesting, and the interaction between players, the way how they will be interacting is also something which is a very strong point of this game. We will be having tons of interactions during a game. We will have diplomatic disputes. We will be trying to take control of territories which are controlled by our opponent. We will be playing very nasty intrigue cards on our opponents or national cards. We will be competing on the fleet track. We will be trying to take control of territories just to make sure that our opponent doesn't take control of them. So the number of time that you spend playing this game on the board will be equivalent to the number of time that you will be playing this game over the board, discussing, negotiating, making alliances, trying to secure some objectives, giving something in response to our opponent. So the fact that you will be having this game over the board is also something which I really enjoyed while playing La Belle Époque. The interesting thing is also that playing each empire will give you a different feeling. Each player has its own unique capacity. Each empire has its own special work. Each empire will have a unique set of objectives to accomplish. So when playing each empire, you will have a different approach. You will be focusing on different parts of the world. For instance, while playing the Russians, you will really rarely enter Africa, because you absolutely have no intention, you have absolutely no objectives in Africa, apart from some very small bonus points for colonies controlled in Africa, or cubes present in Africa. But you will be focusing mainly on Europe and on Asia. Other empires such as France or England will heavily invest in Africa because they have objectives which are set in those countries. So the fact that each empire has its own priorities, which are historical priorities, gives the game an additional historical flair. At the same time, it increases the replay value because playing the game with each empire will give you a different feeling. So the replay value of La Belle Époque will be significantly high. Not only each game can look differently, playing each empire will give you a different feeling. Then we have also some interesting mechanisms which are used in the game. So we have, for instance, the intrigue and the national cards, which are extremely interesting ones, which can be very powerful tools, but at the same time, using them might make you vulnerable to card plays by your opponents, because playing a powerful card on your opponent means that maybe your opponent will reciprocate and will play a similar card on you. So using the cards are when to use a card, on who to use a card are extremely important decisions. We have the additional prestige track when we receive additional bonuses in terms of additional income, additional cubes, additional intrigue cards, and moving on this track is also a key factor, a key element, enabling you to receive additional benefits and boosting significantly your potential. We have also the event cards, which give you one more historical element, which again puts the emphasis on the period in which the game is set. So you have, for instance, the Portuguese bankruptcy, you have the Dreyfus affair, you have the American-Spanish War, we have the French Sino War. You have tons of interesting events alongside with the sudden death card, meaning that World War I erupts and the game, as do the La Belle Époque, suddenly ends. I love it. I think the game really has a special historical flavor, and I like games which tell us a story. This one definitely does. So what, in my opinion, are the weaker points of La Belle Époque? Because there still are few which I would like to explain right now. The first thing is that the game is supposed to last 2 to 3 hours. but sometimes, especially while learning the game, it can drag a lot longer. If the game ends due to sudden death on turn 7, 3 hours are maybe achievable, or if you know well the rules, it is absolutely achievable. But if you're learning the game, if you're playing a full 9 turns game, it will be significantly longer. It can drag up to 4.5 hours. So you should expect, especially while learning the game, that it will take longer than expected. The second aspect related to this is the fact that an experienced player will have almost always an edge over a non-experienced player. Something who has his first experience with Belle Époque might be overwhelmed by the number of options, by the number of actions disponible. He has to play at least 2-3 turns, possibly the full 3 turns from the first era, to see how scoring works in order to fully understand what are his options, what are his strong points, on what things should he focus in order to achieve the best result. So an experienced player will have the edge over a newbie, and this is also due to the fact that this is not a game extremely easy to play. You still have to invest some time in order to see what is the best approach. The last thing which I found a little bit problematic are the intrigue cards. Now, don't get me wrong, I like this element of the game. I think they can be a game changer, but the fact that they are so different one from another, meaning one is very powerful, the other one is quite weak, makes it sometimes very difficult to play. Because if you are the target of some very nasty cards and you constantly draw weaker ones, you might feel that this is unfair, that the random distribution of the intrigue cards and the fact that they are not equal in terms of strength makes you sometimes feel unlucky, or lucky if you happen to draw the best ones. So the intrigue cards are an interesting addition to the game, but they can be a pain in a certain part of your body, especially if you like games in which this focus on equal terms is high. Here, the intrigue cards and the random distribution sometimes can make you feel unlucky or lucky if you happen to draw the best ones. Even though this is not a huge problem, this is something which will not impact the whole game as it takes really a long time and you are doing a lot of things during the entire game. But it can influence your feeling of playing a game. Concluding, I believe that Belle Époque is an extremely interesting game, a very good game in terms of the quality of what you receive, a game covering a very interesting period of our history in a very interesting way, using clever mechanisms, having tons of interesting elements with a historical flavor, with high interaction, with a high replay value, having really not a lot of things which you won't like in the game, apart the fact that it is quite long and apart the fact that it is quite difficult to start playing at a high level. So if you're introducing new people to this game, you will probably win without any problem the first encounter. Then things will start to become more interesting. This was the review of Belle Époque released by Aleph Game Studio. Thank you a lot for watching this video. I invite you also to take a look at other videos on Wojennik TV. Take also a look at my Facebook and my Instagram accounts. Have a great day and see you next time.